Money Heist gave us love stories between criminals and hostages, between brothers, between enemies. But the most honest relationship in the entire show, the one built on the deepest love, was between a father and a son who spent almost every moment they had together saying everything. And the tragedy is not that Moscow died. The tragedy is what was left unsaid when he did. Today we go inside the relationship. Nobody in Money Heist talks about deeply enough. Moscow and Denver. There is a specific kind of love that exists between fathers and sons who have both done things they are not proud of. It is not the clean, uncomplicated love of a stable family. It is not the love of two people who have always been honest with each other about what they feel. It is something older and more complicated and more painful than that. It is the love of two people who see each other completely failures and all and stay anyway without saying it, without making speeches about it, without ever once using the word love in a conversation, where love was the only thing being discussed. Moscow and Denver had that love, and Money Heist gave us 2 seasons to watch it before taking one of them away. This video is about what those 2 seasons actually showed us, and what it costs 2 people, a father and a son, to love each other that completely and that silently. To understand Moscow and Denver's relationship inside the Mint, you have to understand what they were before it. Denver had a rough start in life, born to a drug-addicted mother and a criminal father. Denver spent most of his childhood getting into fights with anyone who tried to mess with him, and as he entered adulthood, he soon fell into the same criminal lifestyle as his parents. That detail is everything. Denver did not become a criminal despite his father. He became a criminal because of the world his father had built around him. Moscow, a veteran robber who spent much of his life in and out of prison, was the only constant in Denver's life. The only person who stayed, the only blueprint Denver had for what a man was supposed to be. And Moscow knew that. He carried that knowledge that his son's choices were shaped by his own as a quiet, permanent weight across every scene he appeared in. Moscow's goal was to earn enough money for him and Denver to live in a country whose name they can't even pronounce and spend their days drinking mojitos on beaches. That dream, so simple, so specific, so completely achievable with heist money, was not really about the country or the mojitos. It was about Moscow's need to give Denver something his criminal life had never given him. A clean start, in a place where nobody knew what they had been. That was what Moscow was really trying to buy. Not money, redemption, for both of them. Now we get to the secret that defined Moscow's entire relationship with his son. Moscow let Denver believe that his mother left them, but it was revealed in Season 2 that Moscow actually left Denver's mother. Think about what that lie meant, and how long Moscow carried it. Denver grew up believing his mother had abandoned him, that she had chosen drugs and disorder over her own son, that the absence in his life, the missing parent, was her choice, her failure, and Moscow let him believe that for years, across an entire childhood into adulthood. Not because he was cruel, but because the truth was worse. The truth was that Moscow had left, that Denver's father, the one who stayed, the one Denver looked up to, the one whose approval Denver spent his entire life trying to earn, had also made a choice to walk away from a relationship. And Moscow could not bear for Denver to know that, could not bear to be seen by his own son as the man who left. So he constructed a different story, and he maintained it silently, consistently for Denver's entire life. That is not simple dishonesty. That is a father so desperate to be worthy of his son's love that he built that love on a foundation he knew was false. And when the truth came out inside the Mint, when Denver finally heard what had actually happened, it broke something between them, briefly, painfully, in the way that only a truth held too long can break something. But here is what matters most. Denver forgave him before Moscow died, completely, without reservation, because Denver understood even in his anger that everything Moscow had done, including the lie, had been done out of love. Now we look at what Moscow actually did for his son inside the Royal Mint, and how clearly it showed without a single speech exactly how Moscow loved. Denver originally was not supposed to be part of the heist plan, but after Moscow found out that Denver was in debt and owed money to violent drug dealers, he talked the professor into allowing Denver to take part. Moscow put himself on the line with the professor, the man whose plan required absolute discipline and no personal attachments, and asked him to make an exception for his son, because the alternative was leaving Denver outside to face people who would hurt him. He brought Denver into the most dangerous situation of both their lives to protect him from danger. That is the specific, painful logic of a father who has run out of better options. And then when Berlin ordered Denver to execute Monica, Moscow collapsed on the bathroom floor, not from physical weakness, from the weight of what he believed his son had done. Moscow suddenly gets a panic attack, and they lay him down on the bloody washroom floor. Nairobi gets him a blanket because he feels cold. She sits beside him and says a prayer for him. Moscow believed in that moment that by bringing Denver to the heist, he had turned his son into a murderer. He had tried to save Denver, and he believed he had destroyed him instead. That is the defining fear of every parent who has made mistakes, that their mistakes will become their children's, that the damage they carry will transfer, that love alone is not enough to prevent the worst outcomes. Moscow lay on that bathroom floor, carrying that fear completely alone, and it was the most honest moment he ever had. Now we look at Denver's side of this relationship, because the silence was not only Moscow's. Denver loved his father in the way that people love someone they have never been taught how to love properly. Loudly in action, completely in loyalty, and almost never in words. Denver looked up to Moscow as a father, even though he wasn't an ideal role model. That line, even though he wasn't an ideal role model, is the most important line in their entire story. Denver knew, he had always known, that Moscow was not the father from a clean family with a stable home and good choices. He was a criminal. He was in and out of prison. He had lied about Denver's mother for years. He had brought Denver into a heist as a solution to a debt problem. Denver knew all of that and loved him anyway, without conditions, without withholding, without ever once making Moscow feel that his failures had reduced the love by a single degree. That is an extraordinary thing to give another person, especially a person who had given you a complicated, imperfect, sometimes damaging version of a childhood. Denver's laugh, the one the entire fandom recognized, the loud, almost uncomfortable laugh that came out in moments of tension, was the sound of a man who had learned to process difficulty with noise rather than silence, because silence, in Denver's experience, was where the painful things lived. His father had taught him that without meaning to, and Denver carried it, the laugh, the noise, the loudness, all the way through the heist and into the moment he sat beside Moscow as he died. Moscow is shot outside the Royal Mint in Season 1, Part 2. He does not die in a dramatic firefight. He does not go out with a speech or a sacrifice or a moment of cinematic heroism. He is shot, he comes back inside, and he dies slowly in the building with Denver beside him. And in those final moments, everything that had never been said between them did not suddenly get said. That is the most honest thing the show did with this relationship. Words for men like Moscow and Denver always arrived too late, and the tragedy of Moscow's death is not the death itself. It is the permanent conversation that never happened, the things Denver needed to say that had nowhere to go after that building. The gratitude and the anger and the love and the grief, all of it left inside a son who had learned from his father how to carry things silently. Moscow died the way he had lived, beside his son, in the middle of something dangerous, having done everything he could with what he had. Denver survived the way Moscow had always hoped he would. But survival, without the person you most needed to tell about it, is its own kind of loss. And Denver carried that loss all the way to the end of the show, loudly, the only way he knew how. Moscow and Denver were not the most dramatic relationship in Money Heist. They were not the most romantic. Not the most controversial, not the most psychologically complex. They were the most human. Two imperfect people, a father who lied to protect the image his son needed, and a son who forgave every lie because he understood the love underneath it, doing the best they could with the tools a difficult life had given them. The Sacapuntas duo, but with burglaries and mojitos on a beach that Moscow never made it to. If this made you feel something, or if you think another relationship in Money Heist deserved this kind of breakdown, drop it in the comments. Next video, we go inside the character who saw through everyone in Money Heist and paid nothing for it, Rio, the most invisible character in the entire show. See you there.